Good morning and welcome to today's episode of The Boardroom, where we're going to be giving our next economic forecast and speaking to two experts in the field. As always, we're live on Facebook and we would love to have your questions or your comments for our interviewees, so please do add them below. If you don't manage to catch this live though, don't worry, it will be streamed back on who'swho.mt, Malta's leading business portal. Now, today it's time to take a second look. We did this early on in the series, a second look at an economic forecast. Difficult to do, very difficult to predict given the current scenario, but we're going to try our best. We do have some recent statistics coming out of the NSO. The second quarter working day adjusted turnover in selected service activities was down by 27.1% in the second quarter compared to last year, and down a similar amount when compared to the previous quarter. Food and accommodation were the sectors that were hardest hit. Their turnover was down by 87.1%. And then conversely, but perhaps not surprisingly, ICT activities were up by 14.8%. Now, to help us make light of those statistics and to give us a lot of insight into perhaps what we can expect from the weeks and months to come, please allow me to welcome two of Malta's top economic brains. They are JP Fabry, economist and partner at Seed, and Gordon Cordina, executive director at eCubed Consultants Limited. JP and Gordon, thank you so much for being back on the boardroom with us this morning. Gordon, I'm going to come straight to you. What has the second wave, we're now perhaps in the second wave, changed about your expectations for Malta's economic performance this year?
Yep, I think that the forecasts which were originally published were potentially looking at a reactivation of economic activity somewhat later in the year, or perhaps even going into next year. So possibly we might be looking at numbers for this year which are not within the extreme scenarios which had been provided to us early on in the onset of the pandemic. But perhaps what is even more important than the numbers themselves and the forecasts, which are changing week by week, is the extent of the economy reacting to these developments, learning from its mistakes, and adapting to the changing situation, not only locally, but even more important, globally, because at the end of the day, whatever incomes we will be earning going forward will very much depend on the extent to which our export markets for both products and services will be available to us.
Thank you. So, Gordon, if I had to ask you just very quickly to say, do you think we're in a better position or a worse position than you thought? What would you say?
I think that we are overall in a perhaps somewhat better situation, mainly because economic policymakers around the world have realized that a lockdown situation cannot be sustained indefinitely. Economies globally have the need to restart, to function, to work, even to take risks and learn from those risks and adapt, but essentially to function. Otherwise, the risks and the problems which will result from inactivity could be far worse than those which would result from the continuation of the pandemic. And this is a global lesson, which of course has very important local implications.
Absolutely. So JP, now I'll come to you perhaps for your thoughts on how we're doing versus your thoughts when we spoke originally at the start of the pandemic.
Yes, I share as well Gordon's thinking over here. I think rather than always focusing on the quantifiable impact, I mean, we know that the impact is negative. I think what we really need to focus on, especially now going forward, is what lessons are we going to take from this, and more importantly, focusing on this new reality. We have been talking about a new normal. Many people have maybe focused primarily on working remotely from home and all of that. But in reality, the new normal is going to be living with the pandemic till there's a vaccine anytime soon. This is going to remain here like a reality when seasonal influenza picks in. It's just that it's not seasonal, but it's continuing throughout the year. So I think what's going to be very key, especially from an economic debate, is going to be, and also a business debate, is going to be adaptation. And this was the theme that we had mentioned in our first debate a couple of months ago. And this is going to be true not only for countries, but also for companies. So business leaders need to sit down and actually start seeing exactly how their business is going to adapt given these circumstances, which aren't transitory, but are here to stay. Definitely till a vaccine is found, and the new reality of it's a sort of tax on human interaction at the end of the day. So I think this is a new big reality that we're going to face. Obviously, this has an impact on particular economic sectors, and the numbers show this straight away. So you have anything whereby human interaction is key to that economic activity. So it's tourism related, accommodation, hospitality, food and bev. So these are all sectors which unfortunately are going to face the brunt, but as time goes by, secondary effects will also and then kick in on the other sectors as well.
Okay. So JP, just to ask that second question to you as well, are we in a better or worse position than you thought we might be at this stage?
I think we're in a more informed position now, in the sense that we're seeing how human society reacts. We're seeing as well now that the virus has taken a different shape in the sense who is really pushing it out there, that now it's the youths that are getting it much more. The sort of diffusion rates that are happening. So I think, as Gordon said, I mean, this is an iteration process. We take some risks, we learn, we adjust, we adapt. But I think now there seems to be global consensus that a lockdown has far more negative consequences rather than adapting and changing our behavior. And this is most probably the hardest at the end of the day, changing human behavior around the new reality.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. Obviously, we can agree that a lockdown is not necessarily what we need to be doing from the economic perspective, but we have had experts, including Tony Zara, saying with the benefit of hindsight, perhaps the economy was opened too fast. Gordon, would you agree with that assessment? And what could the economic result have been from a slower approach, perhaps, to reopening?
Well, I never speak about the benefit of hindsight because, it's a benefit which is no benefit at all unless it is used fruitfully to learn something about our actions going into the future. For sure, risks will need to be taken, and there remain other risks which our country and our businesses will need to go into, not least in deciding the right types of investments or new business models which will be working better or less better in a post-COVID environment. But of course, lessons have to be learned, technologies have to be adapted, working methods have to be better tailored to avoid the risks to human health, which are excessively costly when it comes to the economic activity being generated. However, a freeze is definitely no longer an option, not on the cards. It was okay until we got a better understanding what this phenomenon is really about, and until we psychologically adjusted to what was going on around us. Now we must bite the bullet, and we must forge ahead, keeping the right balance. But that right balance will involve costs, will involve sacrifices, will involve risks. And it is far better for each and every one of us to adapt to this kind of dialectic rather than to take steps and then regret what has been done. Take steps, learn from mistakes, adjust for the future, but definitely with no regrets with respect to the actions that have been taken.
Okay, thank you, Gordon. And JP, coming to you, what can we learn then from the fact that we opened quickly, we went all in, and perhaps now we are experiencing some challenges to the fact that we went so fast? For instance, tourist numbers that perhaps were on the rise, now going back down, accommodation suffering again, restaurants suffering again. Perhaps, JP, what could we do going forward with that knowledge now?
Yes, I think there needs to be a growing realization that we're talking about systems over here. And in order for the recovery to take place properly, and also the opening of economic activities to be sustainable in the long run, it's a question of making sure that all the cogs and the wheels are working fine. So I think we really need to, emphasize discipline and responsibility, both on an individual but also on a collective level, because ultimately that will enhance sustainability of the economic activity going forward. And I think it's the whole supporting mechanisms around the testing, the procedures, the use of technology. We've seen countries, for example, whereby tourists all download apps, they're registered, there's much easier contact and tracing if need be. So I think Malta can learn a lot from other countries that have really adopted technology, even from a tourism perspective, whereby they reduced human interaction also in a number of areas. So increasing contactless payments, tourism guides happening all on mobile apps. So I think technology over here can play a very important role. And then it's a question of being totally transparent and honest with risk assessments and mitigation measures. The risk is here, it's here to stay, we're not going to remove that. It's about the collective economy coming together and making sure that those risks can actually be assessed properly and mitigated accordingly.
Okay. And JP, are we doing that? Are we being, from a policy perspective, are we being as open and honest with with stakeholders as we should be? Or do you think that we need to get stricter about communication, being open about when mistakes are made and how to learn from them, as opposed to perhaps just carrying on?
I think we're improving. I think there was a time, and even there's an element of human behavior at the end of the day. I mean, we need to remember that there were 3 months everyone was logged in, more or less, so everyone, and then just went out in a frenzy, so to speak. And I think now this is where the authorities have to play a key leadership role and making sure that everything is communicated properly, transparently, openly, and when mistakes are made, it's not a blaming game. And I think this is where the Maltese culture needs to adapt. We usually take a blaming approach. Here, we really need to take a learning approach from communication, from risk assessments, which are public at the end of the day, and also any events that are of a national level or organized by key authorities follow the protocols themselves as well. And I think this needs to be a learning by doing at the end of the day. And the more people fall in line and the more people feel responsible and disciplined to act in a certain way, I think through heads following, and then we'll start getting the bigger numbers following directions.
Thank you, JP. Gordon, the UK has recently announced that it has entered its deepest recession for 100 years. Malta hasn't made these claims yet. We don't have the data, of course, to be able to make similar claims here in Malta. But in your opinion, are we entering or are we in a recession?
Well, yes, the fact that GDP is on a negative growth path, is declining, is of course effect, and that cannot be an unexpected outcome because of the very structure in which our economy is being built on. It's not the first time that the Maltese economy had recessions. Some of them we didn't even notice. Some of them were simply caused by large multinational firms recording lower profits in Malta that would have affected our GDP figures, but would have made absolutely no impact on our living standards or incomes within the population itself. So a recession does not necessarily mean an event which will be adversely hitting populations or businesses at large. In Malta, we are currently passing through the phase where government support is sustaining, by and large, incomes and by and large employment levels, which haven't suffered as drastically as GDP figures may perhaps indicate. But as good old economics teaches us, the support coming from government sources cannot last indefinitely. There is a limit to government expenditure, to the government budget in this regard, and that limit can only be extended if the supply side kicks in, if we start again working, producing, exporting, and earning our living as we should be. This is therefore an economic priority. Let us not get fooled by a false sense of security, this time from the economic perspective, to the extent that we think that government support can continue for an indefinite period of time, because definitely that is not the case. I would far prefer a situation where the economy opens up even for a while, earns all the income that it can, to perhaps then go through another wave of shutting down, to be followed by another wave of opening. That's another way to restructure our business, to make it adaptable to these waves of income and activity, which are far preferable to a situation of no activity at all over a prolonged period of time, which would not only mean the fact that we're not earning any income at all, but it would also mean a loss of skills, a loss of potential productive activity, a loss of contact with markets. These are the realities which we are, I think, slowly adapting to and learning to live with. The interesting debates, which JP was also pointing to a while ago, is the extent to which government needs to direct us to behave properly in order to overcome the current problems. Really and truly, the pandemic is very avoidable if people observe strict behavioral norms of contact and of interaction, of social interaction. The point is that people cannot be, to an extent, trusted to behave in that manner unless you have government regulation forcing them or even punishing them if they do not do so. And in order to come to this proper behavioral model where we really start, moving away from the psychology of total lockdown to a false sense of security, to then a rational way of behavior in this new reality, is going to take us, I believe, some more months. But that doesn't mean that our economy can afford many more months of inactivity before we get back to earning more income from abroad.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Gordon. And to move with you now, JP, the aid packages we've had so far from the government, do you believe they have really helped businesses on the ground to keep going and their employees?
Yes, in fact, some surveys have already been published in this effect, which show that, for example, the accommodation, hospitality, a lot of the money the revenue that they have earned has actually been supported through the aid packages. And I think even the disbursements by the Malta Development Bank show that there has been a take-up in the credit lines offered by government. So yes, the aid packages have been critical. I would say from at least my experience helping and dealing with these, it's the implementation that needs to be improved over there. So I think, unfortunately, we're still bogged down by too much administrative pressures, and this is where we really need a digital public service, whereby it's in a time like this, weeks can really spell disaster for a company. And I think it's a question of really making sure that companies are treated really efficiently, and it's not on the burden of the companies to get different documents from different departments, because otherwise companies and jobs are actually on the line. So I think if there is a lesson to be made and learned over here is the move to a digital transformation, to a digital society, whereby we have a digital civil service truly, whereby we can have digital signatures that are accepted, whereby we're not bogged down by half days, for example, but services can continue uninterruptedly during the day. I think this is the true discussion that we need to have also from a long-term economic perspective. As Gordon said, the aid packages are temporary, and their success are in them being temporary, targeted, and timely. So when we're looking at the timely element, implementation, it has to be key. Now, what we really need to do as a country is, because we see this prospect of successive waves, how are we going to live with that? And this is, I think, the biggest quandary that government needs to have over here is, how are we going to protect the so-called war chest if a couple of months down the line, when there is a new wave, which can possibly be even higher due to seasonal pandemics with schools being open, are there enough resources to be able to support companies in distress? So I think this is why we really need to mitigate the risks and make sure that we are able to raise the revenues, generate the incomes when we can, to make sure if there is a successive wave which is higher in intensity, then the government can intervene yet again in a timely, targeted, temporary manner.
Okay. Thank you. And if you were advising JP at the moment, as I'm sure you are, your clients about what they can be doing themselves to mitigate the risks going forward, what thinking should a business leader have at the moment to be able to be successful and get to the other side of the difficulties?
It's very much a question of transformation at the end of the day. So we're assessing business models, you're assessing cost bases, because even going forward, I think that there is a general appreciation that the cost bases that we have seen over the past few months will obviously be deflated in the months to come. So there are decreased pressures as well from a cost perspective. It's trying to transform ways of doing things, finding much more efficiencies in operations, transforming channels of delivery as well. So especially if you're retail, opening up much more and pushing much more weight on the digital platforms. So there's a mix. There's also a mix of seeing which aid measures or which government grants can support companies in new investments or in investments to diversify their operation. And that is why the comment on implementation really becomes key over there. So I think it's a question as well of also knowing that this will pass as well. So Maltese businesses have shown resilience in the past. This is not the first time that they've gone through a downward trend. And I think it's a question of utilizing those resources in the most efficient way to at least prolong that resilience as much as possible, but at the same time transforming themselves cognizant of the new reality that they're facing. And I would say living and internalizing uncertainty. And this is something that maybe the past few months or the past few years have given everyone a false sense of security as well. So I think giving the sense of uncertainty will stabilize expectations or ground them even more than they were.
Certainly, and following on from that, Gordon, businesses are in shock. They have been able to have a period of pretty consistent growth for many sectors over the past few years, and now some in those sectors have been hit very hard. Is there a worry about sort of business leadership fatigue, and perhaps people being overwhelmed and not sure what steps to take? If you had to break this down very simply, your advice to a business leader that perhaps is wondering what to do next, what would that be?
Well, there is hardly a one-size-fits-all answer in this situation. I think we have to make parallels with recovery from disaster. In a sense that our businesses are perhaps learning. Do they have recovery disaster plans? Or don't they? Probably most of them, at least smaller, less organized ones, wouldn't have. But imagine if our larger companies on which a lot of activity and employment depends wouldn't have had those disaster recovery plans. How much would be worse off right now than we are currently, in fact. So it will depend on the context of the business itself. Perhaps some key elements would be the need to think harder about risks and therefore be prepared for the unexpected outcomes which may happen, and plan better for such events. But also to keep in mind that disasters typically then beget innovation and new ways of doing things, which then would present us with opportunities. I'm looking at some businesses who are taking the cue of doing transformations, which they knew that they should have been doing for a long while, but which were unjustifiable to do in a situation where profits were in any case going strong and demand was doing well. Now they're realizing that COVID is presenting them with the opportunity to do those investments which they were justifiable to do quite a while ago. So those are the academic dry elements of innovation, transformation, investments in digital. But the key element here will be the human factor, the human element. And I believe very much in being closer to your staff, your team in these periods of difficulty, supporting them through their individual needs, which once again means not adopting a one-size-fits-all, but being especially responsive also to perhaps the needs of employees who are not Maltese nationals or might have their families away and might be facing a particular set of difficulties which are not to be expected otherwise. Reskill, multi-skill, take all the opportunities for training and the diversification, which JP also mentioned. I think that the bottom line is that the opportunities are there and well-trodden, and we are now learning even more and more about them. Just go out, work hard, and make the best of them, because at the end of the day, our resources are still here. We still remain a very tiny economy compared to the huge markets out there. And if we quickly adapt to fill the right niches, I'm sure that we will be successful once again.
Thank you, Gordon. Another worry that some Maltese businesses have at the moment is related to the possible grey listing of Moneyval, which of course could have very far-reaching repercussions for the future of the economy. Do you think the grey listing will happen? And what do you think the plan should be after that?
Well, I think that a lot of hard work has been done, continues being done, and needs to be done in the near future to ensure that Malta has the best possible outcome from these episodes, just as other countries in similar situations have managed to achieve. So this is once again not a question of making forecasts or predictions about what will happen. It's a question of aligning all our resources so that as a country we achieve the outcome which we so much need in order for our financial services sector, gaming and going beyond is necessary for our continued growth. I'm sure that resources are being directed in an effective manner as we speak, and I look forward to results and hopefully favorable outcomes over the next months.
Okay, so currently impossible to say whether it will be a yes or a no to the grey listing. Okay.
Next question.
Okay, I'll put the same question to JP for your thoughts on the Moneyval and what you think will come out of it.
Yes, I also believe that a lot of work has been done in this regard. We've seen key government agencies coming up with strong reforms as well. So I'm fairly optimistic that we'll manage to pass this test. I think even here, the most important thing are lessons that need to be learned at the end of the day. And I think the biggest lesson that we really as a country need to take from this and transpose it across all other sectors, maybe financial services more, given its highly regulated nature and its importance for Malta's economy. I think as a country, we really need to start thinking much more from a systems perspective, from an ecosystem perspective, that economic sectors depend on a lot of links between institutions, enforcement, laws, banks, payments. So I think we really need to make sure that none of these links are actually broken or fragmented, because that is where and then when the issues start cropping up. So I think any government and any authorities need to start thinking that how their area of concern fits in the broader picture of things, just to make sure that our own ecosystems are healthy, are well functioning, because that ultimately constitutes our competitive advantage and our investment attractiveness to foreign operators.
Okay, thank you. But to be clear, JP, you are positive. You believe that there's a good chance we'll make it through.
Yes, I think that the past few months have shown that the resources have been shown and also positioned in the areas that needed.
Thank you. Okay, well, as we start to wrap up today's show, JP, I'd love to come to you for your thoughts on the next 6 months, whether it's from a policy perspective and what needs to be done, or from a business perspective and what the opportunities are. What would be your advice on how to tackle the next 6 months?
Yes, I think ultimately it's a question of understanding, recognizing, and learning to live with risks. Also, I think risk management has now become a key area, not only of national policies, but even of companies. So I think it's a question of embracing those risks, but even more so, supporting the transformation within companies. And I also hope within the national perspective to be able to chart a new way forward for the country and the businesses that operate within.
Thank you, JP. And to you as well, Gordon, the same question about the 6 months ahead.
Well, from a policy perspective, I think that government would be looking at the COVID episode from 3 phases. The first phase was to maintain psychologies and businesses intact, which entailed direct support. The second phase was to stimulate an element of demand for business to start working again. And the third, more long-term and perhaps even more arduous phase is to do the proper investments to safeguard, future-proof our economy going into the future, which is where we need to think about digital, green, so substantial investments in those areas, which in any case our country needed and which will in themselves create demand for businesses in our country. And also, I hope, in the development of human resources, better skills, because we can never hope to become a greener, more digital, more high value added economy unless we really up our game when it comes to the quality of the human resources we are using to provide services and to seek our export markets. I think that this will be money which is not wasted, but it will be well invested in a period which calls for a focus on investment rather than on consumption in order to see us growing well into the next decade.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both there. Obviously, an understanding of the challenging times we've been through so far and the challenges to come, but of course also the massive opportunities that are at play, not just because of the pandemic, but also other elements like the green economy. So thank you both for great insight there and for being with us on the boardroom today. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. My pleasure.
Thank you.
And as always, to those of you watching us at home or in the office, thank you for being with us on the boardroom. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.